Good evening. Thank you for joining us for our Crazy Fun Busy Wednesday night. I'm here with our media coordinator, Chris Congdon, and tonight we're having a convo with Chris about spiritual blindness. It is a tough topic that we started talking about with our live game and lesson on the 16th, and tonight Chris is going to help us dive deeper by offering some more perspective on what spiritual blindness is and what it means for us. So we hope that families watching tonight will continue the conversation at home by considering the same questions and having thought-provoking discussion on what spiritual blindness means to your family. So before we get started, Chris, tell us a little bit about what you do as the media coordinator and how you're able to use your gifts to serve on staff here.
Okay, so I am the media guy here at First United Methodist Church. And so what that means is I use the various media tools that are available to us to tell the story and to share the message of First United Methodist Church. And so that means a whole list of things. It means our website. It means social media. It means print media. It means cable TV. It means live streaming. It means the projection graphics that you see in worship. It means all of our video production. I do a lot of videography, a lot of writing, a lot of editing. Today, for example, I finished up the October newsletter, and then I spent some time with Kyle Johnson working on some tech things, and then I wrote a script, and then I set up the studio for this video shoot, and after this, I'm going to be back to work with the band a little bit later on, and that's just a typical day, is that there's a lot of different things going on, and it's sort of fun to have that many different things to do.
Yeah, it sounds like fun. So with almost everything becoming virtual in ministry lately, what does this new way of work look like for you, and how have things changed?
Well, a big change has been that so much of our Sunday morning worship is now produced ahead of time. The church is open on Sunday mornings. You can come. We'd love to see you if you want to come to worship. And if you come to worship, you'll get a live sermon. The pastor, or even both of them, will be here together. They'll be there in the room giving the message live and in person. But a lot of the rest of the worship service is pre-recorded, and so that is done during the week, and that's something that happens with my office. And so there's a lot more prep for Sunday morning that's going on right now. And many of the things that I do in the pre-pandemic world, the pre-COVID world, they were eye candy, right? I mean, you'd come to church, and church was what you came to because it was a worship experience. It was your community experience, your family experience. You came to church to be with the people and to have worship. And the pretty pictures on the screen were just pretty pictures on the screen. Well, now they're not just pretty pictures on the screen. Now that techie stuff that we do is mission critical. That techie stuff we do is what makes it possible for us to keep having worship. And I'm guessing that as we recover from the pandemic in the next couple of years, we're not going to step back from this. We're going to keep looking for ways to use the technology at our disposal to engage people who can't come and be here in person. Even when the rest of us are coming back in person, we want to be able to reach people who aren't physically here. So those are big changes.
Yeah, and permanent changes.
Yeah.
What's the most important thing that you've learned from this shift in the way that we do ministry?
That people are important. I miss y'all. I miss you, right? I mean, I have had so much fun working through the challenge of taking worship online and turning this into a broadcast thing. But none of that is a substitute or a replacement for the warm bodies. I miss all y'all. We're a community and a family, and it's just not the same without you here. But anyway, that's what I've learned.
Yeah, cool. Well, thanks for telling us about what you do. That's a
Yep.
good segue into tonight's lesson. So we're talking about spiritual blindness, and that is when we can't see God or understand his message. Even as believers in Christ, we've all experienced times of spiritual blindness, probably when something extremely difficult has happened in our life. Only Jesus can restore our spiritual sight, just as he healed a blind man in the book of John. So 2 weeks ago, we read how Jesus healed a blind man, and here is the entire story. As Jesus walked along, he saw a man who was blind from birth. Jesus' disciples asked, "Rabbi, who sinned so that he was born blind, this man or his parents?" Jesus answered, "Neither he nor his parents. This happened so that God's mighty works might be displayed in him. While it's daytime, we must do the works of him who sent me. Night is coming when no one can work. While I am in the world, I am the light of the world." After he said this, he spit on the ground, made mud with the saliva, and smeared the mud on the man's eyes. Jesus said to him, "Go, wash in the pool of Siloam." This word means sent. So the man went away and washed. When he returned, he could see. The man's neighbors and those who used to see him when he was a beggar said, "Isn't this the man who used to sit and beg?" Some said, "It is," and others said, "No, it's someone who looks like him." But the man said, "Yes, it's me." So they asked him, "How are you now able to see?" He answered, "The man they call Jesus made mud, smeared it on my eyes, and said, 'Go to the pool of Siloam and wash.' So I went and washed, and then I could see." They asked, "Where is this man?" He replied, "I don't know." So on the surface, this is a story about Jesus healing a man's physical blindness, but Jesus actually uses the physical healing to address spiritual blindness. Who might you identify, Chris, as being spiritually blind in this story, and what are some of the signs that showed you that they might be spiritually blind?
Everybody in the story except Jesus.
That's the answer.
Okay. It's an awesome story. It starts out with the disciples are there with Jesus, and they encounter this guy, and they say, "Jesus, why is this guy blind? Is it something he did, or is it something his parents did? Is he being punished for something?" So the disciples right there are missing something if they think this guy is blind because of a sin that he's committed or a sin that his parents have committed, right? The disciples asked that question, and Jesus is like, "No, this guy isn't blind because of a sin. He's blind because the glory of God is about to be revealed in him." Hold my beer. Scoops up the dust and spits in it and puts it on. It's like he does a miraculous thing. That's why this guy's blind, so I can show you this. I don't know, the neighbors, right when you stopped reading, the neighbors that were familiar with the guy, the blind guy. He needs a name so we can talk about him. I don't know. Dave. They were the neighbors who had always known Dave, started to ask questions about this, and they weren't really seeing what was going on here. They weren't really grasping it. They weren't absorbing it. So I'd say they were probably spiritually blind. And as the story goes on, the neighbors then get the Pharisees involved reading the rest of the chapter. And the Pharisees, they put Dave through the third degree, asking him questions about, well, who did this to you? Who healed you? Are you sure you're the blind guy? And then the Pharisees dragged Dave's parents into the thing, right? And said, "Are you sure this is your son? Was he the blind one?" And then they get all PO'd at Jesus, like, "You were healing on the Sabbath?" I mean, so the Pharisees are certainly blind because all of the evidence that's right here in front of them is pointing to this miraculous thing that's been done, and they still won't see it. They still can't get it.
Yeah,
So
they don't understand what God's doing. They
exactly.
don't understand the message behind it. Yeah.
Is that okay? Is that too long?
No, I like that.
Okay.
I like that answer.
All right.
So working for the church, sometimes people think that it means we have our spiritual lives together 100% of the time, but that is just not true. We are human too. So tell us about a time when you experienced spiritual blindness in your life and what was happening and what kind of effect did it have on your life?
Well, this is a hard one to answer. A time of spiritual blindness, and actually, I would kind of say I'm in one right now, and it has to do with divisiveness, and it has to do with polarization. And we find that in our politics, and we find it in our church. There's this big unresolved issue that exists in our global United Methodist Church, and I feel kind of lost amidst all of that right at the moment. I feel rejected by the folks that I most closely identify with because I disagree with them on one issue. And yet I don't feel fully accepted by the folks on the other side either. I'm trying to be a good centrist because I think that's where good ideas and good leadership come from. And I'm not finding a place where I fit, either in our national politics or in the church. And so you're probably thinking, well, Chris, that's not spiritual blindness. That's just being confused in a confusing time. But I'm actually thinking it's a spiritual thing because I think I experienced Christ. I experienced the love of God through contact with other people. And as I think about my interactions with folks within the global United Methodist Church, not our church, the global United Methodist. As I think about my interactions and the things that I hear and read from the leadership on the conservative side, the traditionalist side, and then on the progressive side, I'm not feeling Jesus in that. And these are supposed to be my leadership. And so that's why I say this is spiritual for me. Maybe that's a stretch to call it spiritual, but that's kind of where I am right now. I'm not sure where I fit in all of this.
Yeah, I can see how that would be spiritual blindness because it's hard to sense God and Jesus among division and polarization, like you said. So I see that. So in times like this, what helps you to be able to see again?
I think we navigate this kind of a situation. I think I'll navigate this situation. You all have your own answers. The same way a blind person would learn how to navigate their neighborhood. A blind person learning to navigate their neighborhood won't focus on the things they can't see. Right? They'll focus on what they can. They'll focus on the other senses and the things that they can be sure of. They'll use their ears. They'll use their hands. They'll use their feet. They'll use what they can trust and what they know. The same thing with times of spiritual blindness. You fall back on the things you can trust spiritually, right? And for me, that's the red letters in the Bible. And specifically, it's the Great Commandment and the Great Commission. And divisiveness has driven me to try to simplify things, right? I don't want to fight about every darn thing that's out there. I want to make things simple. And when I look at the Great Commandment and the Great Commission, love God, love his children, tell everybody. It's that simple for me. And so as I navigate this particular bit of spiritual blindness, that's what I fall back on. I'm just saying, this is a time when I need to make my faith simple, stick to those basics, and we will rebuild from there.
I like it. I like the focus on what you can trust. I think that's really important. So in the Bible story that we read, the man's parents were afraid to take a stand. The Pharisees themselves are divided about Jesus, but no one speaks out. So tell us about a time where you were afraid to take a stand. What happened and why were you afraid?
My life has been pretty free of deep controversy, and I haven't had many serious conflicts where real issues of life or justice are on the line that I've been able to stand up for. So that's hard for me to come up with a really good example. But what I will say is that I like to think about issues. I like to think about things that are going on, things that other people are talking about. And I like to try to decide where I stand on them. And I take my stand through writing. I've got a blog. I don't write for it as often as I would like to, but I like to think things through and then post where I stand on things out there for everyone to see. But that's not without some stress. That's scary because I've addressed things like racism, like the border wall on the wall on the Mexican border. I've talked about LGBTQ rights within the church, and I know that there are people who read these things, people who've been very important to me, to my spiritual development, who will read that and disagree with it. And I'm afraid of that confrontation with people that I care about and people I look up to. But that's how I take my stand. I just think about things, I write it down, I throw it out there. So.
I like it. Yeah. So I think it's important to realize that we all experience spiritual blindness in our lives. Sometimes we go through hard things that make it difficult to see God or feel his presence with us. And even when we know in our hearts that he's always there, we often struggle to understand why he does the things that he does. It can feel like we're walking through a dark room trying to feel our way to the light switch so we can turn it on and just see again. But God, being the good Father that he is, has designed healing for us. When we make a faith commitment to follow Jesus, our relationship with him is made whole, and we know that we will be with him forever. It can be scary at times, like you mentioned, but 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 7 tells us that we walk by faith and not by sight. So we know that even when we experience spiritual blindness, our faith in Jesus is there to guide us as we continue to walk. Chris, what are your closing thoughts on spiritual blindness? What do you think kids and families should take away from our conversation tonight?
Yeah, I don't know what else to add, to be honest. But I love the point that you just made just a minute ago, that it's important to realize that we all experience spiritual blindness in our lives, right? It's going to happen. There are times when things are really clear to us and everything's going fine, and we know exactly where we are in our spiritual life and in other areas of our life. And then it doesn't seem to take much before that all just sort of becomes cloudy, and now all of a sudden we can't see where we are. And that's important when it's our spirituality that we're talking about, when it's our faith that we're talking about. That goes to the core of what we see our purpose for living as, and it goes to the core of whether we see ourselves as members of God's family or not. So the spiritual stuff's important. It's important, and because it's important to not panic, right? When we get into these times of darkness, I mean, you talk about fumbling for the light switch. Yeah, just chill out. You'll find it, right? Eventually, you'll find it. Don't panic if your fingers don't land on that light switch immediately. Just like we said before, just go back to the basics, the things you know, and rebuild from there.
All right, that's a great lesson for all of us, Chris. So thank you for joining us tonight, for providing your insight, and thank you for everything that you're doing up in the media tower to keep our ministries running and continually reaching people, even through a pandemic. So families, we hope that you enjoyed our convo with Chris, and we'll post tonight's questions to the First Friends and Family Facebook group so you can all continue in this conversation with your family. Next week, join us for a socially distant in-person gathering at Big Woods Lake at 6:30. We will provide devotions for you to do as a family or a small group while you enjoy the fresh air and the company of your church family. We'll see you then.